On our 8th anniversary, my wife sent me 999 roses. But she forgot what I'd told her, how after every time my father beat my mother, a single, broken rose would appear in the house as an apology. Clutching the small urn with our cat's ashes, I calmly asked her for a divorce. Over the phone, her little lapdog was already apologizing, his voice thick with tears. "Mr. Vance, it's all my fault. I acted on my own. Please, don't be angry with Miss Crofts." Victoria soothed him for a long time before finally turning her attention to me. "I haven't cheated on you. You're the only man I've ever been with." I asked her what she even considered cheating. "You lie in bed next to me, but you'll jump up and leave at one phone call from another man. You bask in the adoration in his eyes. Then you come home and expect me to have a hot meal waiting for you. You know damn well this isn't fair. This isn't love. We both know what loving someone is supposed to look like. Make me something to eat." Victoria had come home after midnight, and for the first time, there was no hot meal waiting for her on the dining table. She frowned instinctively, gave me the order, and walked into the bathroom. When she came out, wrapped in a cloud of steam, I was still just sitting there, casually playing a game on my phone. She pulled a Patek Philippe from her luggage. "Here, do you like it?" It was a magnificent timepiece, clearly a style designed to appeal to a man. In the past, when she wanted to appease me, she would do anything I wanted. Now, she just threw empty gifts at me. I didn't even bother to give it a second glance. I turned off my screen and asked, "When do you have time to get a divorce?" Victoria Croft was a very busy woman, so busy that even her anniversary gift had to be chosen by her personal assistant. When it came to scheduling, I was always the one who had to accommodate her. "Don't be ridiculous," she said with a humorless smile, pouring herself a small glass of whiskey and sitting in the armchair opposite me. "Connor didn't know you hated roses. It won't happen again." Connor was Victoria's childhood friend. He'd been in love with her forever, and the moment he graduated from an Ivy League school, he rushed to become her assistant. They were inseparable, to the point that they even shared a suite when they traveled for business. Honestly, I didn't blame Connor for being so persistent. It takes two to tango. If she hadn't given him the opening, if she maintained any sense of propriety, no man could have gotten that close. I let out an exaggerated yawn, the corners of my eyes watering. While I didn't reply, Victoria assumed the topic was closed. She asked about our 7-year-old daughter's latest test scores. I shook my head. I don't know. It wasn't to spite her. I genuinely didn't know. The Croft family believed in an elite upbringing. Our daughter had been raised at the family estate since she was a toddler, her days packed with all sorts of lessons. It was laughable, really. I was her biological father, yet I could count on one hand the number of times I was allowed to see her. I'd fought them on it, but the Crofts were unmoved. In their eyes, the fact that I had married Victoria and become connected to their family was a blessing from my ancestors. Anything more was pure fantasy. Victoria pinched the bridge of her elegant nose and told me I needed to focus more on our child. "If this keeps up, Connor is going to seem more like her father than you are." I knew what she meant. Yesterday was Friday, the one day of the week I was permitted to pick up my daughter from school. I arrived an hour early and waited until it was dark, until the school gates were locked. Only then did Connor call to inform me that the Croft matriarch had asked him to bring our daughter back to the estate for dinner. Through the phone, I could hear Victoria's voice. She was asking Connor, with a smile in her tone, if he wanted some soup. Snapping back to the present, I gave Victoria a smirk that didn't reach my eyes. "Wouldn't that be perfect for you? I'll leave right now, and he could take my place as Mr. Vance." Something in my words must have struck a nerve. Victoria was silent for several seconds, then her face hardened with fury. "My patience has a limit, Leo. Can you, for once, act like a grown man and stop throwing these tantrums?" She stood up and took 2 steps before I spoke again, my voice flat. "Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you. Bubbles is dead. Bubbles was the ragdoll cat we got when we first got together. A month ago, on the same night, she rushed out of the house after a call from Connor. Bubbles suddenly started foaming at the mouth. I drove him to the emergency vet myself. They told me he'd ingested something that had perforated his stomach. It was too late. The most absurd part is that when they told me Bubbles was gone, I felt a wave of relief. Holding the small box of his ashes, I thought it's time to end this. His existence had been a testament to our love. Ever since Connor appeared, Bubbles and I only had each other for comfort. Every night, he would sleep in a spot on the bed where Victoria used to be. Now that he was gone, Victoria and I were also at our end. In the living room, Victoria stood with her back to me, her knuckles white as she gripped the whiskey glass. She didn't ask why I hadn't called her. She didn't even ask how Bubbles died. She knew perfectly well that I had taken him to the vet by myself multiple times before that, and she hadn't cared. She knew how many times I called her late that night while he was dying. But my calls, as always, went unanswered. Good riddance, she finally said, heading for the study. Bubbles was getting old anyway, and this just proves you weren't a very good owner. She closed the door with practiced finality. 8 years of marriage, countless arguments. I was always the one to apologize first, to smooth things over. This time, however, Victoria didn't hear the sheepish knock on her door. Half an hour later, she opened it to find the sprawling house empty. I was gone. I was Victoria's first love. No one could have imagined that the brilliant, beautiful, and aloof heiress would fall for a rebellious punk who spent his days smoking and hitting up clubs. Our first meeting wasn't pretty, a grimy, foul-smelling alley where some local thugs were harassing her for money. I just happened to be passing by. One of them challenged me, told me to mind my own business. So I revved my motorcycle and drove straight into the crowd. While I was teaching the lowlifes a lesson, I inadvertently saved the shy little princess from a crisis. After that, Victoria clung to me like glue. She'd wait for me after school, trailing behind me no matter how many times I told her to get lost. She brought me flowers, which I coldly flushed down the toilet before dumping the soggy mess back on her desk. She made me ridiculously expensive lunches, which I'd casually pass out to my friends. My buddies all joked that I had my own rich, obsessed fangirl. Anyone could see we were from different worlds. But this girl, this delicate little thing who looked like she couldn't hurt a fly, was the one who dared to break into my house when my gambling addict mother beat me so badly I couldn't go to school. She was the one who picked up my barely conscious body and rushed me to the hospital. As the doctor stitched me up, she stood with her back to me, her shoulders shaking uncontrollably as she wiped at her face. The doctor, amused and exasperated, asked her why she was crying when she wasn't the one who was hurt. She said she didn't know why, just that her chest ached terribly. She even foolishly asked the doctor if she needed an EKG. In the hospital room, Victoria clumsily peeled an apple. I never want to feel like that again. Leo, please don't get hurt anymore. I'm begging you. I was eating a popsicle she'd bought me. I mumbled an okay, then shot her a fierce glare. So, are you going to be my girlfriend or not? For the rest of that day, we were both so red-faced we couldn't say a word. I once told Victoria a secret no one else knew. After my father's drunken rages, after he'd beat my mother half to death, a single, broken rose would always appear the next day as an apology. After he left, my mother started doing the same thing. After she beat me, there would be the rose. So, I told her if she ever wanted to break up with me, she wouldn't have to say a word. Just one rose would be enough. You idiot, the 18-year-old girl whispered, holding me tight. We're going to be together forever. To escape my mother's toxic grip, Victoria took me with her to study abroad. In retaliation, her father cut off all her financial support. Back then, on top of our classes, we both had to work 2 part-time jobs. Those days were exhausting, but we found joy in the smallest moments, making goofy faces at each other while we brushed our teeth. Our tiny apartment was filled with laughter and arguments, our eyes filled with each other. If only life could have stayed like that forever. Mr. Vance, are you feeling all right? The doctor's voice pulled me back to the present. It was my 3rd day since moving out of the mansion, and my chronic insomnia had gotten worse. I took the prescription for sleeping pills and was heading to the pharmacy when I ran into Connor. Mr. Vance, what are you doing at the hospital alone? Connor blinked innocently. When I didn't answer, his eyes filled with pity. I heard from Victoria about your child. My condolences. Don't worry, it was just a cat. The words had barely left my mouth when Victoria walked up, her face a thundercloud. I didn't know why she was angry, but I saw her clenching a can of medicinal spray. Connor proudly explained that he hadn't been watching his step on the stairs and had twisted his ankle. It was just a minor injury, he said, not worth a hospital visit, but Victoria had insisted on bringing him, making him late for work. It was my turn at the pharmacy counter. Seeing the bag in my hand, Victoria couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong with you?" When I treated her like she was invisible and started to walk away, she snatched the bag from my hand and looked inside. Insomnia? Since when do you have insomnia? She raised her voice. Leo, I'm talking to you. Tell me, how long are you going to keep this up? Victoria thought my leaving was just another one of my antics, a new tactic to get her attention. That's why, even now, she hadn't bothered to ask where I'd been staying or what I'd been doing for the past few days. Her cold, clipped tone, growing louder by the second, drew stares from people nearby. A flicker of annoyance crossed my face. I took the bag of medication back from her and said in a low voice, "I'm not playing games with you." Perhaps my tone was too calm, too detached, because Victoria took it as a sign of surrender. She offered to drive me home first, then take Connor back to the office. But I just shook my head. Work is more important. I can get back on my own. When I said back, I meant back to my own place. When my gambling addict mother died in a car crash, she left me not only a settlement check, but also the house I had once desperately wanted to escape. The place where I was always getting hit was now my only sanctuary. Watching my solitary figure walk away, Victoria pursed her lips. She took a step to follow, but Connor grabbed her arm. His face was pale as he complained of feeling unwell, probably another flare-up of his stomach issues. Victoria hesitated for a moment. Then, instead of following me, she turned and walked toward a nearby vending machine. The same day, my lawyer drafted the divorce agreement. I got a call from Victoria. Her voice was urgent and grim. Our daughter is sick. Get to the main house before 6. Before I could ask what was wrong, she hung up. I printed out the agreement, a smile of pure relief spreading across my face. When I arrived at the Crofts family estate, I found the entire clan assembled. They were in the middle of a typical family dinner. My daughter was seated right between Victoria and Connor. From an outsider's perspective, they were the real family of 3. My eyes stung. I walked over to the daughter I hadn't seen in ages, stroked her hair, and gently asked what was wrong. The little girl's delicate features were a miniature version of Victoria's. She slapped my hand away with a look of disgust, her eyes darting to Connor for help. A sharp, needle-like pain pierced my heart. Connor wrapped his arm around my daughter protectively. "Chloe's not sick," he said, his tone deceptively innocent. "Leo, did you take too many of those sleeping pills? Are you getting confused?" At his words, every Croft family member turned to look at me with disdain. I knew what they were thinking, mocking me just as they always had. Especially Victoria's brother, Caleb. He'd always believed I was beneath his sister. In the past, for Victoria's sake, I had swallowed all his insults and provocations. But not this time. I was done being the spineless nice guy. I turned to Victoria. "You told me on the phone that our child was sick, and I needed to come over. I rush all the way here, and your little boyfriend tells me nothing's wrong. So which one of you is lying? Or are you two the ones who are sick in the head?" Connor hadn't expected such a forceful response. Panic flickered in his eyes. He opened his mouth to explain, but I gave him no chance. I looked down at him and issued a warning. "Connor, if you want to be some married woman's lapdog, that's your business. But don't you dare use my daughter as a pawn in your little game, or you'll regret it." The blunt insult made Connor's face turn shades of green and red. His eyes welled up with wounded tears. Clatter! Victoria slammed her chopsticks down, her face cold, her eyes burning into me. "Leo, all you ever do is wallow in jealousy. Our daughter has had a cold for days. Have you shown a single ounce of concern as her father?" She continued, "And we said 6 o'clock. You really kept everyone waiting? Since you have such a poor concept of time, you can go eat in the side hall with the staff." Victoria's word was law. In this house, no one dared to defy her. A flash of triumph crossed Connor's face as he pouted, feigning sympathy while waiting for the show. Caleb shot me a look of pure, undisguised contempt. Under the gaze of the entire family, I walked over to the housekeeper, Maria. "Maria, when you have a moment, come over to my place. I'll cook for you." I didn't want her to think I was embarrassed to eat with the staff. After I spoke, my eyes met Victoria's. I gave her a contemptuous smile. "You make me sick." As I turned to leave, Victoria finally lost her composure. She shot up from her seat, grabbing my wrist, her fury undeniable. "Where do you think you're going? Did I say you could leave?" Her audacity stunned me. "What the hell does it matter to you? Let go of me." Catching a look from Connor, Caleb immediately chimed in with a sneer. "Leo, you haven't changed a bit after all these years. Still no class. A stray dog is always a stray dog. You'll never belong in a place like this." At that, Victoria actually turned and snapped at her brother. "You, shut your mouth." In that moment of distraction, I finally wrenched my arm free. Her nails had dug into my wrist, and the stinging pain ignited a rage that had been buried for years. I scanned the room, my chilling gaze finally landing on Caleb's smug, arrogant face. "You want to see what someone with no class is really like?" I asked him. I calmly walked over to Caleb. As I spoke, I picked up the glass of red wine he was so fond of and, without hurrying, poured it over his head. It happened so fast that no one saw it coming. No one could have predicted that the son-in-law who had always been so meek and compliant in the Croft house would do something so outrageously disrespectful. For a few seconds, the mansion was eerily silent. Then, Caleb let out a piercing shriek of rage. As if waking from a dream, everyone else erupted, their eyes wide with fury as they rushed to his defense. The elegant family dinner devolved into a chaotic mess, as loud and irritating as a fish market. But inside, I was ecstatic. What was it people call the spice of life? This was it. Chaotic loud. It was wonderful. Of course, when all that noise is directed at you, it could be a bit overwhelming. I only have one mouth, and I certainly couldn't outshout them. The only thing I could do was identify the ringleader, the one most consumed by rage. As he stood there, trembling, raising his hand to slap me, I moved with lightning speed. I grabbed his throat and shoved a large, unpeeled lobster claw into his foul mouth. Finally, Caleb Croft was quiet. I looked at Victoria with a half-smile. That's how you shut someone up. Understand? Seeing the aghast, furious faces of the Croft family, especially the old matriarch who was now clutching her chest and pointing a trembling finger at me while sputtering curses, I knew they still didn't quite get what no class really meant. I sighed internally, walked to the corner of the dining table, and with one swift, sharp motion, yanked the white tablecloth off. Crash! Dishes, glasses, and food went flying. Not a single member of the Croft family, nor their dignity, was spared in the carnage. The well-heeled are always afraid of the barefoot man with nothing to lose. Perhaps it was the madness of my actions, contrasted with the unnerving clarity in my eyes. For a moment, no one dared to speak or come near me. My eyes met Victoria's. I gave her a relaxed shrug. I wanted to do that since the first day I stepped into this house. I said, my voice light. 8 years. I guess I'm more patient than I thought. Good thing that from now on, I don't have to hold back anymore. Mrs. Croft clutched her heart, her voice trembling as she told Victoria to divorce me immediately. Before I could thank her for her blessing, Victoria announced to everyone that I was in a poor mental state and they shouldn't take me seriously. Leo, clean this up, she said, her voice dangerously low. This is your last chance. Her words were met with stunned disbelief from Connor and the rest of her family. Even I felt the urge to check her forehead for a fever. Was she insane? You're a psycho, I said, then simply pulled the divorce papers from my bag and threw them at her in front of everyone. Chloe, Daddy will come see you when he has time. With that, I walked out of the Croft estate without a single look back. As I was about to start the car, I saw Victoria in the rearview mirror running after me, with Connor trailing close behind. Her hand was bleeding, cut by the shattered porcelain. But she seemed oblivious to the pain, banging on my car window while Connor, his voice cracking, begged her to let him treat the wound. She ignored him, demanding I get out of the car so we could talk properly. Leo. Victoria couldn't believe I was completely ignoring her. I slammed my foot on the gas and sped away, leaving her in a cloud of exhaust. That night, my phone buzzed nonstop. Even on silent, the screen lit up and went dark over and over until I couldn't take it anymore and pulled out the SIM card. Unable to reach me by phone, Victoria started sending texts. She asked when I had started planning the divorce. Was it just because of the 999 roses? If so, she'd already apologized. She didn't understand why I couldn't let it go. She said I couldn't just throw away an 8-year relationship over someone else's mistake. Our daughter was still young. I couldn't be so cruel as to rob her of a complete family. I thought for a moment, then texted back one sentence. You need to calm down. It was the same line she had used on me for years, every time I had a breakdown. I knew exactly how powerful those words were. Sure enough, 2 minutes after I sent it, Victoria went silent. For the next week, she didn't contact me, but I knew she was around. I saw her car cruising through my old neighborhood. I was on the roof having a smoke when I spotted the familiar license plate. I gave a lazy stretch and went back inside without a second thought. We weren't officially divorced yet, but I had already started my new life. I got a job at a coffee shop in a park near my apartment. I've been a house husband for so long, I'd almost forgotten how to talk to people. Luckily, my latte art skills hadn't gotten too rusty, and most of the customers were patient and kind. One of them was a college student who came by every day with her fluffy, white Samoyed. Sometimes she'd ask me to watch her dog, who was tied up outside. We got to talking, and I found out she lived in my building. She was a vet intern, practically my neighbor. We'd occasionally run into each other downstairs when she was walking her dog, and we'd chat or take a short walk together. Sometimes she'd invite me to her clinic to play with the animals. Sometimes I'd share my leftover dinner with her. We became good, casual friends. Near the end of the week, I finally got a text from Victoria. She told me to come to her office to handle the divorce papers. She never used to like me visiting her at work. I figured she didn't want people knowing that the young, beautiful CEO had a deadbeat husband cramping her style. I had just gotten off my shift at the cafe, so I went straight to her office, still wearing my apron. When I arrived, Victoria was on the phone. She glanced at me several times, motioning for me to sit and wait. I noticed Connor wasn't there, so I skipped the coffee and just started playing games on my phone. By the time I'd used up all my lives, I realized Victoria had been standing behind me for some time, watching me play. Sign it. She looked away and tossed a new divorce agreement onto the coffee table. I didn't sign it right away as she expected. Instead, I carefully read through the terms. It was more generous than I'd anticipated. However, after watching countless videos from divorce lawyers online, I wasn't so easy to fool anymore. I told her I wanted the overseas properties she had purchased in the last 2 years, and in exchange, I would waive any claim to her company's original shares. Victoria was stunned for a moment, but she quickly called her legal consultant and had them send over a revised agreement. Just as I was about to sign, she covered the signature line with her hand. "Read this carefully," she said, her face grim. "I get full custody of her child. Once you sign this, you will have absolutely no connection to her whatsoever." Of course, I knew that. I also knew that while the law granted me visitation rights, if the Croft family didn't want it to happen, I would probably never see my daughter again. It would be a lie to say it didn't hurt. But no matter how much it hurt, this divorce had to happen. With Victoria, at least our daughter would never have to worry about money. I got her a rich mother. She's already won the lottery of life. Victoria didn't expect me to be able to joke at a time like this. I watched as she tore the agreement to shreds. She sneered and told me to get out. "I have things to do. We're done for today." I was silent for a moment, then laughed mockingly. "Fine by me. I'll just file for divorce myself. Because I am so sick of you." "Stop." I said stop. Victoria had never lost her composure like this. She followed me out of her office, ignoring the furtive glances of her employees, all the way to the elevator. "You've met someone else, haven't you? That perfume on you. It's hers, isn't it? If not, how could you be so heartless as to abandon your own daughter?" The elevator doors opened, and Connor stepped out. He'd had the day off, and if a coworker hadn't tipped him off, he would never have known I was at the office. Connor came from a respectable family and cared deeply about appearances. He tried to gently persuade Victoria to let me leave, but she shoved him aside, her eyes blazing. "This is between my husband and me. It has nothing to do with you." The color drained from Connor's face. He looked around, not missing the whispers and pointed fingers from the onlookers. Before I showed up, everyone in the company had practically assumed he and Victoria were a couple. After a scene like this, he couldn't imagine the rumors that would fly. Connor turned, his face dark, and fled toward the stairwell. Seeing this, I smiled faintly at Victoria. "Aren't you going to go after him?" I never really hated Connor. The only person who had betrayed the trust between Victoria and me was Victoria herself. I got back in touch with some of my old friends. Mike, Dave, and me, we were the three amigos. They were the guys who had been there with me through the worst of it, hiding from our toxic families, hitting rock bottom together. They'd always known where I lived and had my number. But as we got older, we fell into that unspoken rule among adults, and they hadn't wanted to bother me. I told them everything about the Crofts. After a few drinks, they were ready to march over and burn the family estate to the ground. We laughed until we were crying, clutching each other like we used to. Gradually, my insomnia started to fade. But my peaceful new life didn't even last a full month before Victoria came to disrupt it again. She showed up at my apartment uninvited. She stood outside my door from 3 in the afternoon until 1 in the morning, making the neighbors so uncomfortable they were about to call the police. I had no choice but to let her in. She had lost a lot of weight. Her face was no longer perfectly composed, and the confident, commanding light in her eyes was gone. Maria had told me that after I left, Victoria started spending more time at the family estate. At first, Mrs. Croft was overjoyed, preparing lavish feasts for her daughter and granddaughter every day. She even invited Connor to stay for a while, openly trying to set them up, hoping they'd produce a male heir. But no one expected Victoria to become increasingly picky with her food, her appetite shrinking by the day. And then, her temper grew strangely volatile. One day, she spent an entire day in a storage room, searching for something from her high school years. When she couldn't find it, she flew into a rage at the staff member in charge of old belongings. A few days ago, she had thrown Connor out of her bedroom in front of all the maids. They had a massive fight. Connor, gasping for breath, lost his footing and fell down the stairs, shattering his ankle and nearly ruining his face. Mrs. Croft was so incensed by her daughter's accusation that she was ruining her marriage that she had a heart attack. An ambulance had to take them both away that night. They were still in the hospital. As for Victoria, looking at her now, haggard and lost, I figured she hadn't had a good night's sleep in a long time. Just like me after I lost Bubbles. The first thing she said to me was, "I'm sorry." She told me she had done a lot of thinking and finally understood why I wanted a divorce. 8 years of a soul-crushing marriage where I had no voice, where I had compromised myself into nothing. "I know you're completely disappointed in me." I shook my head. Disappointment was 2 years ago. Filing for divorce was a calculated decision. Disappointment isn't fatal. What's fatal is the calm, numb despair that follows, and the acceptance that comes after that. But we had been married, after all. I thought for a moment and said, Victoria, I'm starting a new life. You need to pull yourself together and start your own. Victoria looked around the small living room and gave me a bitter smile. Do you remember how I came here and got you out all those years ago? Even after 8 years, I still dream about you back then. Leo, I admit I neglected you, but I never cheated. You are the only man I have ever been with. I asked her again, what exactly is cheating? You lie next to me, but you'll jump out of bed for a call from another man. You bask in the adoration in his eyes, then come home and expect me to have a hot meal waiting. You know damn well this isn't fair. This isn't love. We both know what loving someone is supposed to look like. A memory seemed to surface, and her eyes reddened. I know it was all my fault. Just give me one more chance. I can't accept this, Leo. I'm begging you, please. She asked if I remembered what I said at her father's funeral. You said you'd always be with me, that we'd die on the same day and be buried in the same plot. You said you would never, ever leave me. Have you forgotten all of that? Those vows, those sweet promises, at the time, every word was heartfelt. Time wasn't the enemy. The human heart was just a fickle, hateful thing. Because she had changed, I had no choice but to change, too. Just then, the doorbell rang. I got up and opened it. It was the young vet intern from my building. She glanced at Victoria inside, then asked me pointedly if she was interrupting. Before I could answer, Victoria shoved me aside and slapped her across the face. Apparently, Victoria had seen me with my neighbor before. No wonder she'd accused me of finding someone new. The two women, without any preamble, started to grapple and shout. I stood to the side, trying to reason with them for a while. When it was clear I couldn't stop them, I simply threw up my hands. If you want to fight, take it outside. It has nothing to do with me, and don't come crying to me when you get hurt. With a slam, I shut the door. I don't know how the situation was resolved. All I know is that Victoria never showed up at my door again. About 2 months later, after she was discharged from the hospital, Mrs. Crofts contacted me. In a complete reversal of her usual attitude, she said that my daughter missed me and asked when I could come see her. I showed up at the school on my new Harley-Davidson, decked out in a leather jacket and riding gear. That day, there wasn't a cooler single dad at the school gates. Kids are easy to please. Anything new and exciting will win their approval. I took my daughter out for the fast food she'd always wanted to try, but the Crofts would never allow. After we ate, she asked if I could pick her up again next week. I chuckled, helped her with her helmet, and drove her back to the estate. I hadn't planned on going inside, but Mrs. Croft and Maria stopped me, their expressions complex, and invited me in for at least a cup of tea. My daughter also begged me to come up and play for a while. I hadn't seen her room in a long time and couldn't resist the temptation. On the third floor, I happened to see Victoria in her home office in the middle of a video conference. I stood frozen for I don't know how long, until my daughter tugged on my sleeve, pulling me into her room. I played with her for a while, my mind elsewhere. Checking the time, I told her, Daddy has to go home now. If I have time next week, I'll come see you again. Can I go home with you? With Mommy too? Blood is thicker than water. I didn't know if the Crofts had coached her to say that, but I could feel the sincerity in her voice. Maybe someday, but just you. We're not bringing Mommy. Even with a child, I couldn't bring myself to lie and give her false hope. When I stepped out of her room, Victoria was already waiting for me down the hall. She smiled at me. Are you hungry? I had just eaten less than 2 hours ago, but I saw the fine lines at the corners of her eyes. I paused, then accepted her unspoken invitation. Starving. Why? Are you cooking? MHM. I'll make you dinner. We went down to the first floor kitchen. It was empty. Victoria asked what I wanted to eat. I said anything was fine, and she took out a clean, white ceramic pot. She started rinsing rice to make a simple pasta dish with a creamy sauce. The truth is, Victoria was a better cook than me. When we were overseas, she was always craving Chinese food. We couldn't afford restaurants back then, so after a full day of part-time jobs, I'd rush to the Asian market around 8 or 9 at night, digging through the discount bins for vegetables and meat, trying to whip up something different for every night. We didn't have this pasta often, usually only when she was sick and didn't have much of an appetite. Thinking back on those times, a faint smile appeared on my face without me realizing. I didn't rush her, and she didn't make small talk. She focused on the food, and I focused on waiting. For a fleeting moment, it felt like nothing between us had ever changed. This was the longest it had ever taken her to make this dish. I don't know if the heat was too high or if it was on for too long, but the kitchen began to fill with the smell of something burning. Victoria seemed oblivious. Finally, she lifted the pot, not even turning off the stove, and brought it straight to the table, serving me a heaping bowl. From this close, I was certain the bottom was burnt, but I didn't say anything. I just started to eat the delicacy I would never taste again. Is it good? Victoria asked, desperate for my approval. When I nodded, she seemed not to believe me. She grabbed a spoon and took a taste from my bowl. It was terribly bitter. There was no seasoning, and the bottom was scorched. It was worse than just bad. How did this happen? I heard her muttering to herself. She said she'd done everything just like I used to, even adding a pinch of sugar. Don't eat that. I'll make a new batch. She reached for my bowl, but she seemed to have forgotten the pasta was fresh from the stove. The searing heat made her drop the bowl instinctively, and its contents splattered all over the table. I frowned. Victoria, stop. I'm full. No, it's not good. Just wait a little longer, it'll be quick. She was talking to me while trying to clean up the mess with her bare hands. I watched as her hand turned red, then quickly swelled up, the skin blistering from the burn. I spoke coldly. Stop playing the victim. I don't feel a shred of pity for you. I wasn't lying. At that moment, looking at her hair now threaded with gray, all I felt was a twisted sense of karmic justice. She had brought all of this on herself. Everything was exactly what she deserved. Victoria stared at me, her eyes vacant for a long, long time. She would never understand how someone could just say they've stopped loving and mean it. After I left, Victoria sat alone in that kitchen all night. Soon after, she fell ill. It started with acute pneumonia that left her frighteningly thin. After she was discharged, she began to suffer from terrible insomnia, night after night. Eventually, she could only get to sleep with the help of medication. Mrs. Crofts swallowed her pride and begged me to visit her more often. I ignored her completely. The Crofts called me cold and heartless and forbade my daughter from seeing me, her so-called father. But they forgot that a child is not a doll. She has her own sense of right and wrong. For the most part, Victoria turned a blind eye whenever I occasionally spirited our daughter away to let her enjoy the simple joys a child her age should have. 1 month, 3 months, 6 months passed. Victoria finally understood that there was no future for us. But even then, she chose to escape. In the world she built inside her head, I was still in that small apartment overseas. After she took her medication and fell asleep, we would continue our happy life together in her dreams. Eventually, I had to file for divorce. The first petition was denied. The second, citing our clear separation and the death of our relationship, was successful. The divorce made me a bona fide bachelor. I didn't buy a new place, just renovated my old apartment to make it more comfortable. The vet in turn with the dog confessed her feelings for me once. After I politely declined, she gracefully disappeared from my life. It wasn't that I never wanted to date again. In fact, after the divorce was final, I was open to pursuing women I was interested in. But I was no longer putting love at the center of my life. My own happiness, my own feelings, that's what mattered most now. In the airport lounge, I sat with my 2 best friends. They had both begged their wives for a half-month off just for me. We were debating the latest Champions League matches while shamelessly rating the flight attendants walking by. Amid our laughter, an elegant, beautiful woman happened to walk past. We all immediately sat up straight, feigning composure. But our dignified act lasted less than a minute. Hey, you guys hungry? They've got free instant ramen over there. The 3 of us looked at each other and, in perfect unison, started rock, paper, scissors. Loser goes to get the food. The semi-transparent glass reflected the image of 3 men roaring with laughter. Outside the tall windows, against a backdrop of endless blue sky, freedom was taking off. The end.